some people who live in a dream world, as we know, and there's some who face reality, and then there are those who turn one into the other. So it's kind of like movements, isn't it? What might be to Joe Public as an absolute dream, there's strands of truth too, might be absolute truths, but where there's smoke, there's generally always a fire. How did it get started for me? Well, won't be down the rabbit hole. That's probably why most of you are here. Started for me, really strangely. Just full of acid when I was younger. I was taking an awful lot of it, and I was watching an episode of The X-Files, which you might have seen. Mulder ends up in it's like a buried train compartment thing in the desert, and they're doing all kinds of weird experiments with them and stuff. Then the aliens come and kidnap them and take them somewhere else, and kind of got us thinking a little bit. And I thought what I was thinking about was more to do with religion and kind of these rigid dogmas, and I thought about that even more when I met a Jehovah's Witness, and I married a Jehovah's Witness. In fact, I was that far away from being a Jehovah's Witness, but like I say, when I asked them some fundamentally important questions, they couldn't answer it. You always detracted back to, oh, God did it. God did it. God can do anything. And being a scientist is very, very unsatisfactory for me. I started down the science route in 2006. I was a right tearaway at school. I didn't even finish school. I went to John Spence, just up the road there. I left when I was 14. I ran away to London. I was in gangs and everything. And so I was a right tearaway. I went back to college, which was North Trafford College in 2005 and 6, and I absolutely aced everything. And I was awarded the Outstanding Adult Learner of the Year for North Trafford in 2006. I went on to Kingston University in London in 2006 to do a degree in Earth Systems and Planetary Science. I was originally going to do nursing, but I don't like sick people or anything like that. So I got told to do something I enjoy, and like I say, the crux of the degree was a lot to do with earth sciences, plate tectonics, volcanoes, earthquakes, really exciting earth science kind of stuff. And in the third year, we focused a lot on planetary science, because to understand what's out there, you've got to understand what's happening here on Earth first, because it's the only thing we can relate something to. And as far as we know, I know a lot of you have got a different opinion, even I have a different opinion. The only place we know in the universe to have life is Earth. And I know that's a bit of a misnomer, let's face it. But to Joe Public, and that's the way I'm presenting this today, it's as if we know nothing, and the only place we know life exists is on Earth. Here, my dissertation was on the formation and evolution of Io and Europa, which are the two innermost moons of Jupiter. If there's a good candidate for life in the solar system, then it's like get me fancy laser pen out. Europa is the place to find out. Okay, and I think you're going to see I think NASA are trying to launch a probe there that's going to drill down a little bit, then release another probe and look for simple amino acids in the water. I think they're going to find a lot more than that personally. I was awarded the Lawrence Webb Memorial Prize for fieldwork in 2009 when I graduated, and the generosity gave us a £25 gift certificate for that as well. Generous spirits. Got me £40,000 debt for going to university. When I left university, I went to a lot of conferences. I really got into the ufology thing quite deeply. Started hanging around with this guy, Ben Emlyn Jones, who I know a lot of you have met before. I've been on Hapanwo TV and Hapanwo Radio a number of times. I think I've been on there as many times as Andrew Johnson's been on Rich Planet. Alright, then we started talking about exopolitics and disclosure. Exopolitics is a really interesting thing. It seems to have run its distance though, and there's a lot of people going to different kind of disciplines, if you like, but I think exopolitics is still really important. It's really important, exopolitics, because it discusses, if they're going to come here and visit us, do we really want people like Theresa May speaking for us? Do we really want the UN speaking for us? I think we're doing. A guy called Timothy Leary first recognised this way back in the 60s. He's like, hey man, do you really want these people to speak for us if they learn? And he's absolutely right. And in more recent years, well, we've had a lot of geopolitical events with Brexit and Donald Trump Euro and everything. I've been looking a bit closely at that recently, but getting back to more exopolitics. Disclosure here, there's two kinds of disclosure. You'll hear Nick Pope. Anyone like Nick Pope?
No.
Nick Pope, Nick Pope talks about disclosure with a small d, whereas people in the truth movements, exopolitics, talk about disclosure with a capital D. When you see disclosure with a capital D, it's rather a brainchild of a guy called Steve Bassett. He's a ufological campaigner on like through mainstream things. He thinks that one day the government's going to turn around and go, look, sorry guys, we've been lying to you for 70 years. Sorry, we're doing it for your own good. That, to me, that's never going to happen. We're never going to have a capital D disclosure. The only way, in my opinion, we'll get a capital D disclosure is if an Independence Day-sized craft lands across Newcastle, and even then, I'd encourage you to go out with your catapults and just make sure it's real and not kind of like holograph. Right, you've probably all heard this before. Genesis 6:4. I've brought two different Bibles along just to make me point. There's there were giants on the earth. In this one, this is the King James one. This one I got off Jehovah's Witnesses. It says the Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days. So they've got a Nephilim. This Bible is from the very early 1940s. This is my mum's Bible, and what this one says in the same verse is, oh God, it's like reading the bottom line at the opticians. It says, where are we? There's 6. Oh no, I'm on the wrong page. Chapter 6, well, there we go. There were giants on the earth in those days, so they've used the term giants in the older Bible, whereas the more recent Bibles are using terms like Elohim. The only one I haven't seen appear in the Bible is the Anunnaki were on earth in those days. But like I say, take your pick. I think they're all the same thing. You might be aware of a well-known History Channel documentary. I think it's on its 4th season now, called Ancient Aliens. You all heard of Ancient Aliens? Well, I think there's a lot of fundamental truths that they speak, but because it's all these things, you've got to remember they're done for entertainment purposes. They're not there to inform you, they're there to entertain you. And if you ever watch anything about these issues, they'll spend half an hour giving you some of the best evidence there is at the start of the programme, then the last half an hour absolutely debunking it with the most crazier theories than conspiracy theories, if you like. They'll spend the last half an hour, so you're meant to be left with, yeah, it was strange, but it's a bit of bullshit, isn't it? When, it's not bullshit. Found giant skeletons all over the earth, every continent, apart from maybe Antarctica, where I haven't heard any giant skeletons coming from Antarctica, but North America and South America in particular, in some places in Europe and Siberia that have found giant skeletons. There's a massive cover-up about it, swept under the carpet. The Smithsonian Institute in America seem to be behind the cover-up, or the crux of the cover-up. They bury more stuff than they actually dig up. 2 people to look out for. Klaus Don, I'm going to talk about him in a bit, and Michael Cremo. Michael Cremo wrote a book called Forbidden Archaeology. It was a big seller. They talked about things like 300-million-year-old skeletons found in coal beds that have got exactly the same anatomy as us. They weren't giants or anything, they were skeletons literally found in coal beds. They found bells, they found pots, they found cups, they found artefacts again in 300-million-year beds of coal. They couldn't have got there any other how. See, I think what's happening is they're trying to mix up ancient civilizations with aliens themselves. I'm not saying that aliens didn't have something to do with something somewhere along the lines. It's, most recently they say, well, the Ice Age finished about 11 or 12,000 years ago, so everything's kind of sprang off that. I think we'll go way back. Earth's about 4.6 billion years old, 4.54 billion years old, and I think it's been habitable for about at least a billion years. That civilization I'm talking about is probably Atlantis or older. If you listen to Graham Hancock, I'm sure you're familiar with Graham Hancock. There's some great work on ancient civilizations. Here's some news articles. I think in this one, look at the skeletons of 12 giant Indians. I don't know if they were Indians per se, but because they're found in an Indian settlement, they've just assumed that they're Indians. On this one, look at this guy's 9 feet tall. So not your average human being. is this? Here we're looking at this paragraph here. All the skeletons seem to have massive jaws, little chins, and strong teeth, which, when polished, showed a gloss in the sunlight, indicating the almost total absence of tartar. So at least the food was better than ours. Let's face it, isn't it? They probably weren't eating loads of sugar and shite with it. But like I say, there's all these different artifacts have been found. And, here's another one. Petrified skeleton of a giant. These articles go on and on and on. These are just a select few. Honestly, there's hundreds of articles clearing that they found skeletons. This is one of the only genuine pictures I could find of one of them finds, and this guy probably here is probably a good 6 feet, so I dare say this thing's probably between 9 to 12 feet, and it's one of the only original pictures I could find that are very, very hard to come by. There's a femur in Mount Blanco Museum. That's about 4.5 feet, the femur, so the femur's probably about that big. So that probably belonged to a guy who was a good, 12, 13 feet tall. And like I say, there's little drips of evidence around everywhere like that. I mean, why is this not more talked about? There were giants on the earth. They've got a document here that, a lot of people in the world believe in. They believe it, but yet they'll dismiss things like huge bones in museums. These masks have been found in burial mounds, again, all over the world. This one was found in conjunction with some artifacts that were found in Ecuador. Now what's funny about these masks is they come in all shapes and forms, but the eyes are always set here. Why would you make a mask that you could only see out of one eye? It's because they belong to something a lot bigger than we were, whose eyes were further apart, because they were bigger. Be careful. Be very, very careful when looking at these things on the internet. When Photoshop first came around, they ran a competition to see, sorry God, to see who could come up with the best Photoshop version of a giant. And as I say, I think this one's the worst. Look, you've got a digger there. These things are massive. I mean, the length from there to there must be about 40 feet. So that skull would be 40 feet. I think they were giants. I think if you're looking at anything like that, though, I think it's very frivolous. Be very careful. For every real photograph of a giant, like I showed you before, there's about 10,000 fake ones. The internet play it through and through. So just be very careful if you're looking at that kind of thing. Right, has anyone read The Serious Mysteries by Robert K.G. Temple? He went and visited, actually his work's based on the work of two French anthropologists, the names Dieter and Raoul, hope I'm pronouncing them right, and they said the Dogon tribe in Mali, Northern Africa, knew about, is everyone familiar with astronomy, what stars are in the sky? The brightest star in the night sky is called Sirius. And if you look, everyone's familiar with the constellation Orion. If you follow the three kings, or the Orion's belt, if you follow it down to the left, the brightest star in the night sky, which is also the biblical star in the east, which is a different story, is Sirius. Now, the Dogon people knew of Sirius A star. They also knew of Sirius B star. We didn't know about Sirius B until the 1840s sometime, but these guys knew. They knew it was a white dwarf as well. They knew it was made of very dense material. But what's more phenomenal about the whole thing is they knew it had a 50-year elliptical orbit around the A star. Here's the Dogon diagram, and here's a modern astronomical diagram. They've got the sun at one end of the foci, which is right if you get into astronomy, and like I say, they knew it had a 50-year elliptical orbit. They also said it had a C star. We haven't found the C star today, but there is enough evidence to suggest that there probably is a C star. But again, the Dogon people knew about the A, B, and C star. The C star, I think they've called it Digitaria. I can't remember the names for the A and B star, but the C star called Digitaria. I think we're going to find it in modern astronomy very soon. Here's the path of Sirius A and B. Again, there's the Dogon drawn, and there's the astronomical diagram from modern astronomy. As it say, that's not just a coincidence. Right now, what the skeptics will tell you, Gideon and Graul told them all of this. They told them all of this. They must have. So these two French anthropologists, who didn't really know anything of astronomy, told the doggone everything they knew about elliptical orbits of stars. And I mean, these two guys were French anthropologists. They were just interested in the tribe themselves. They didn't know anything about astronomy. So the skeptics will say, well, you know, there was enough astronomical knowledge for them to just pass it on. And you know, I mean, the doggone tribe, neither. You'll hear people say that they're very cut off. They're not very cut off, but I don't think that they could have known about a 50-year elliptical orbit of a B star around an A star. That's phenomenal astronomical knowledge, and I think they were given that by these people, the Nomo. They were called semi-aquatic beings, like I say, known as the Nomo, and the doggone said that they came out of the sea in the evening to give them knowledge such as writing, mathematics, astronomy, and it's these people who came from the Sirius star system, semi-aquatic beings. As you know, we've all heard of UFOs coming out of the sea, strange cryptozoological creatures getting washed up on the beach, but I think this has got something to do with it. We know more about the moon's surface. I sound like a science teacher. We know more about the moon's surface than we do about the sea. I think there's a lot more hiding in the sea that we haven't found. But this is the Nomo, this is the original drawn from the doggone. You can find modern depictions of it, and I think people talk about, I'm not familiar with this stuff, but chakras and all the rest of it, and this is what all these things represent. And it reminded us of Mesopotamian legends about where they got their knowledge from and how they came across modern cultures and things. I think this is the tree of life, and you always notice there's always a guy with a fish on his head, always with a fish on his head. This thing that you always see represented, I think it's a language thing. I think that is a flying saucer. I really think that's a flying saucer. Every time you see that depicted, I think it means something did come from the sky. Owens is a Mesopotamian mythology. He's the original guy who gave the Babylonians all the knowledge about astronomy and math, and he came out of the sea at night as well. And he wore a fish on his head, and his feet came out from his fish cave and everything. I don't think this is a coincidence. I think it's exactly the same thing. I think it's well like the Bible. I think it's a story that's been told and told and told so much that people have added their own aspects to it over time, and it's just been mixed up. But when you look at Owens himself, you can go to I mean, this is carved in stone. This is in the British Museum in London. You can see it there. They've got a fantastic section of Assyria, and they're always depicted wearing the fish with the plaited beard, with the man bag. Does anybody know what the man bag's for? Still a mystery, you see, but yeah, they're all depicted holding the man bag. And this thing, the pine cone, does anyone know what the pine cone represents?
Pineal.
The pineal gland, yeah. Outside the Vatican,
it's classic Anunnaki, isn't it?
big pine cone, yeah. Well, it could be the Anunnaki. It's I deliberately stayed away from the Anunnaki because it's right though. It's like the Sumerians talk about the Anunnaki, or those who from heaven earth came. It's the reason I didn't use them is because I couldn't find the word Anunnaki in the Bible. It's a bit harder.
Elohim is supposed to represent Anunnaki.
Elohim,
Word.
Nephilim. You know, I think, like I say, it's a language thing. Someone calls it potato, someone calls it patata. You know.
Or frittata.
And here he is, His Holiness, wearing his fish on his head. And although it's not there, but he also holds a scepter with a pine cone on it. See, nothing's changed. Just the names have changed. In 325 AD, I think it was, with Constantine, he made the Catholic Church, and he threw lots of relevant documents out, like the Book of Enoch, which is always cited as, you know, having winged angels and flying discs, and you know. But I don't think anything's changed. I think it's still the same people pulling the strings. Now, are these people 50,000 years old, or can they transcend bodies, or are the spirit? I don't know. Are they aliens? I don't know. I haven't got any answers there, but it's kept me awake at night for nearly 15 years. Alright, this is Klaus Donner, who was talking before. Absolutely brilliant researcher. He was the art exhibit curator for the Habsburg House of Austria. He also did an Earth Mysteries exhibition, and he took it around the world. He actually had asked a lot of people who won't give their names who have these artifacts in their private collections, and some of the artifacts will blow you away. It blows modern history out of the water completely. He did a video that you can watch on YouTube. It's called The Hidden History of the Human Race. It was through Project Camelot. It's on for 45 to 50 minutes. However, I must add, Klaus Donner has a very drab Austrian voice. It's very hard to follow, and although his artifacts are very good, it might take him 2 or 3 times to watch it. This is the world stone. It's basically a map of the world made in stone. It was found in a gold mine in Ecuador, and they reckon some of these articles are around 17,000 years old. But here you've got a natural quartz line running through the rock from both sides. From around Saudi Arabia, you've got this eye, which is an inlay eye. It's not a natural part of the rock. It's been put there. It glows under black light. This continent here that appears, I think that's Atlantis. It doesn't exist today. And Japan, there's just one continental landmass, which must mean that this rock is at least 12,000 years old. Also here, you can see another inlay. We'll have more pictures of it, more glossy pictures. The inlay here is in Ecuador, where some of these artifacts were found, and it also shows the location of the best quality drinking water on the planet. You're familiar with the Bush family, presidents and all that? They've just bought up a massive plot of land above where the best quality drinking water on the planet is.
Why are we not surprised?
You know something. There's just another view of the map. And like I said, this inlay eye is round about Saudi Arabia, so you know, old Mesopotamia. Something definitely happened there, and something definitely happened in South America, because are you all aware with the megaliths about what's in South America itself? You've got some huge stones. You've got places like Pumapunku, Teotihuacan, and they're like the Great Pyramids. I don't know why they're not kind of talked about in conjunction with the Great Pyramids, because we've got pyramids all over the planet. But the question is, who's built them and when they were built? Nobody can tell you. But yeah, they all use a similar design. There's a picture of the eye that's inlaid, which brings us on to the next artifact, which is a phenomenal one. Right, you've all seen the dollar bill. You all know about the Illuminati and the eye. This was found in the same gold mine. Again, it's about 17,000 years old. It's got all the steps, and it has an eye at the top, which glows heavily under black light. Also, they found loads of different articles. Like I say, if you want to see about them, please watch the Klaus Donner video. But this was found. Does anyone know what the problem is with this being found in South America? The cobras never existed in South America. Yes, there was this and numerous other cobra artifacts found in the cave. And again, they were about 17,000 years old at best estimates. On the bottom of the pyramid, you've got an inlay of gold plate showing some of the stars of Orion. There's Professor Kurt Schildman, I forgot which institute he's attached to, but he's an expert in 24 languages, including ancient languages. He said this writing here is older than the oldest writing we've ever seen. We've found it on every continent. The oldest writing we're aware of is Sanskrit, and he called this pre-Sanskrit. His best translation of it was "the Son of the Creator comes." There's another artifact. It shines really heavily under black light, and if you have a little bit of metal on a string and you swing it like a pendulum across the triangle there, the middle bit is very heavily magnetic. It'll stop something in its tracks. So why were they interested in magnetism and these geometric shapes? This is the genetic disc. If you just hold on, I'll have something else to show you. Right, this is phenomenal. This is actually only about 2 inches across. It's called the genetic disc, and what it shows is what you can only see under a microscope. It's the female egg and the male sperm forming into a human, or what you might consider an alien. There's both sides of it. You've got the female, the male, and different stages of the egg's development. So it looks like this happy-go-lucky fella here. Do you remember the mask with the two eyes set far apart? And again, this is made out of a rock called Luddite, and there was lots of artifacts found made out of Luddite. Now, Luddite's probably nearly as hard as granite, and it's even harder to work. If with our best technology today, we could not make that. You can only see these details as well under a microscope, and it's carved out of Luddite. This is a similar rock to Luddite. It's not Luddite. If you want to pass that around, it's very hard to work. It's formed in sheets. We couldn't do that today with our best technology. Never mind get that kind of intricate detail that you can only see under a microscope.
Can you see? Can you see? Yeah, I'll pass it round.
Right. Coming away from ancient times, sort of Middle Ages, 15, oh, wait, I've got the date, 1551 I reckon it is. 1561, sorry. I was telling you. In 1561, in Nuremberg, Germany, all these things came out of the sky and they had a massive battle. Some of them fell to earth, and after about an hour, when it was finished, I mean, these orbs were fighting each other. There was these two huge semicircular blood red things that I said, and after it was all finished, this huge black triangular thing appears. So I've looked at weather phenomena, I've looked at astronomical phenomena, and it doesn't go anywhere near explaining what happened here. I'll put on the text, feel free to read it at your leisure. This is the text, what was written. This is a better translation. I've highlighted some of the
Project Bluebeam, wasn't it?
strange things, yeah. I mean, that's to me as a UFO encounter through and through. That wasn't a secret space program or anything in 1561. That was a fully fledged aerial battle with aliens, as far as I'm concerned. Two blood red semicircular arcs. You've just got to look at the language that they're using. They couldn't say, "Oh, it was a bloody aeroplane, was it?" You know, it was a satellite. It was a fireball from space, it was a meteorite. They didn't know of any of these things then, they could only use the language they were familiar with. I always said if you could take Shakespeare to Heathrow Airport, how would he describe some of the things he was seeing? He could only use the language that he was familiar with at the time. He wouldn't be, well, it's a Boeing 747. They could only use the language that they were familiar with at the time. And I mean, this was the best one for me, where the big black triangles turn up at the time. See, I think some of the orbs were like drones fighting each other. But the colours that they're using, things like blood red, I mean, if you look at the side of a 730, in fact, any aeroplane, it has to have a red light, it has to have a green light, and it has to have a white light. They would describe that red light as blood red. You know, these things were giving off light. But, as always, they put it down to God. It was an act of God, so nobody really thought anything more of it. But what I found interesting was 5 years later, just along the road in Basel, Switzerland, a very similar thing happened. Just literally 5 years later. Yeah, although there was no appearance of black triangles or anything at the time, all these orbs started coming out, fighting each other. There was a few crosses, and they all fell to earth, and it was witnessed by thousands and thousands of people. But again, they lived in dogmatic times. They would probably put it all down to God, because God did it. I like this guy. What's he doing? Okay, I haven't got a translation of this, but I'm sure you can find it somewhere on the internet. I found the other translation very interesting because of the black triangle. Moving further forward still, you might have heard of this Aurora, Texas. A UFO crashed in 1897. It had a pilot, and they buried it in the local cemetery. There's been a lot of investigations into this. There really has. The two most notable ones were done by UFO Files and UFO Hunters. I do particularly like these two, even though they're on the History Channel, because they come to some interesting conclusions. A bit like Jesse Ventura, the Arch conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura. I thought Although it was done for entertainment purposes, he did actually come to some very interesting conclusions. With this one, UFO files went there and they said, well, can we dig up the grave? But unfortunately, the Texas Cemetery Commission was, no, that'll just open the door for everyone's grave to get exhumed, so we won't go there. So they went there with a metal detector and they detected metal under the grave. When they went back, the grave had been removed and a metal pipe had been pushed in the ground, and there was no traces of metal under the ground anymore. I think someone was getting too close to the truth. UFO hunters did a very similar investigation, came to a very similar conclusion, except allegedly some of the wreckage from the UFO was put down a well, and the well had been nailed up. They did get permission to open up the well, and they found very high traces of aluminium in the water, but unfortunately the wreckage had been removed, apparently by the farm's previous owners. Right, it could be a hoax, because the town had a tragic history. It was left off the Harriman Railroad, and the town went bankrupt, and they had a lot of problems. So this is what skeptics will tell you. They were making it up to keep the town popular. Well, you know, is a UFO crash gonna feed people? You know, it's, I mean, you've got a bit of novelty value. Yeah, it's brought a little bit into Roswell, but Roswell was, you know, Roswell's massive in conjunction to ufology, whereas, you know, this, and they even put a little memorial to it. A spaceship crashed nearby in 1897, and the victim of the crash was buried here. So they don't deny it. And you know, in 1897, I don't think they were thinking too much about cover-ups. I think there was probably factions that were interested in the technology, certainly. But again, I think governments had more say back then, so somebody definitely knew something. And I think there was probably a myriad of cases pre-1947. Why 1947? Well, Mac Brazel found some wreckage on his ranch, which again became the Roswell thing. And Kenneth Arnold coined the term flying saucers because he was flying past Mount Rainier in America, and he seen 9 discs skipping across the sky like a saucer would out of water. That's when we came up with the term flying saucer. July the 12th, the same things were seen in Tulsa. I've got a picture of it next. And in August, I forgot what date in August, Churchill ordered the pursuit of a metallic ball that was doing supersonic speeds right down the English Channel. So it's sent a Spitfire up, couldn't catch it. Silver ball escaped. There's the sighting over Tulsa. Then you've got one over here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then, I'm sitting on the fence. It is possible that we could have had a secret space program at the time, but again, proving it is impossible. Why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Well, they flew across the White House in 1952. All the way it was witnessed by, again, thousands of people. It was caught on some news footage, and there they are, quite clearly flying across the White House. So when they say, why haven't they landed on the White House lawn? Don't know, but they have flown across it.
They're too frightened of them.
Possibly. Right, this is what got me into ufology. This is what opened the rabbit hole good and proper for me. NASA on the STS-75 shuttle mission, it was Space Shuttle Columbia, did an electrodynamic tether experiment where they dropped a 12-mile tether, which had a little satellite on it, and they dragged it across the ionosphere, creating charged spaces full of charged particles, and it was to create electricity for the space shuttle and future missions. Unfortunately, they did the maths wrong, NASA, and it overloaded and it snapped off. Now, what happened was we should have really been looking at the tether and its functions for our power needs on Earth, but no.
I actually saw a program about it on television last
Yeah,
night.
it's
They debunked it.
no, it's absolutely not debunked. Here's a video of it. It's
Columbia and the satellite now 77 nautical miles apart. In that call
the best
reporting that
debunking is
the crew can see
it's
the tether
ice
and
particles
see the
from the
satellite.
shuttle, or
It's
flecks
beautiful.
flecks of paint from the paintwork on the.
This is the exact same thing that I saw on the program
Yeah.
last night.
This is about 70 odd miles away from the space shuttle. Now it's just a very thin strand, but we can see it.
This
I'll
view
tell you
is
why we
showing
can see it after the video.
the satellite. Again, just moving into sunrise. 81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
As the speaking stopped, they're probably speaking on encrypted radio channels about what they're saying. But where's the evidence? Well, where's the evidence as far as I'm concerned? You're going to see one flying in from the left in a minute. It's the best image of a UFO I've ever
Franklin,
seen.
we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Well, the long line is a tether, and there's a little bit of debris that kind of flies with us, and it's illuminated by the sun at such low angle. So there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly, but Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Is this the radio antenna?
Yeah, that's
description
the
of the group. This
electrodynamical
is a
tether that
tether,
snapped off. That
satellite,
tether's probably about 12 miles long, right? This
Approximately 12 miles of
This thing
tether
here.
still attached
Yeah,
to
what
it.
are they?
Columbia and the
Well,
satellites are now just passing
are
over
they living?
Is it
the
microscopic?
west coast
No.
of northern
No.
Africa.
I'll
The
describe
two
what you're seeing in a
spacecraft are
minute.
now 90 nautical miles apart.
Look like orbs, don't they?
Controllers for the satellites that did have communications with it during the close pass between Columbia and the satellite.
I mean, look how many there is.
Probably Houston, that's a much better view, a lot more contrast visible. And how wide does that tether appear to be? It seems to resemble a much wider strand than we'd expect.
You see the way that they're actually going behind the tether though.
Strand.
They're not going in front of the tether, they're going behind the tether. That's really important.
Maybe they're checking it out.
I think that's what they're doing, yes.
Like we're like, what's there? What's that? And they're like, ooh, what's that? Yeah.
Well, like I say, we can see this tether, we shouldn't be able to see that tether from 70 odd miles away. It's thinner than this cable. Why we're seeing it is because space is full of charged particles. On this end of it was a satellite, and it had a nitrogen fuel tank, and it also had some gyroscopes that could only be
Satellites
controlled
are
by
now
remote control from the space shuttle.
100
Once
nautical
they
miles.
began contact with it, several of the gyroscoping settings were changed and the nitrogen fuel tank was emptied. What you're seeing here is a fluorescent tube effect with the nitrogen fuel tanks and the electricity and the charged particles. That's why you can see the tether. But all the configurations were changed. How did they change the configurations? They weren't changed from the space
God
shuttle.
did it.
God did it. Which is, it's the only way they could have been changed.
You didn't mention that last night.
No. Right. Secret space, us or them. You know, if you look at UFOs, you take 100% of them, about 85% can be explained through weather phenomena, lightning, bin bags flying, weather balloons, you name it. There's loads of different explanations. But out of the 15% that are left for me, I think at least 90% of what you're seeing is the secret space program. The more weird the UFO you're seeing, the more chance it's going to be them, right? Black triangles, silver tubes, all that kind of thing. I think we're getting close to that today. If you have a look at the top 3 defence contractors in the world, you've got Boeing, Lockheed, Skunk Works, and AG&G. In 1967, at the Nevada rocket test site, AG&G boasts that it successfully tested tested the world's first nuclear propulsion system, successful, in 1967. Where's that technology now, and what was it using to propel itself nuclearly? Well, deuterium helium-3 fusion. There's a fella is a PhD at MIT, and he was called Borden Castle Madlich, and he was working on a non-radioactive type of fusion called deuterium helium-3 fusion, and he said that it creates 18 MeV protons. If you don't know science, it's 18 million electron volts. Basically, it's a lot of electricity. Now, he said that turned into a form of propulsion, it could propel a craft at 1/10 the speed of light. 1/10 the speed of light is about 96 million miles per hour. So if we could just tap that and get at least 1/10 the speed of light, well, I'd say you could travel pretty easily to Mars and places within the solar system. Certainly not outside the solar system, but certainly within the solar system. Castle Madlich, he didn't get proper funding, and it never got completed, but he was going to the government for funding. What's to say a corporation didn't step in and go, yeah, we'll have that, here's your funding. The thing with governments having these technologies is that they have to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests. Corporations don't. They can hide behind things like the Trade Secrets Act. This is why if governments had anything that quickly tout out, I mean, after Roswell, things were touted out very quickly to places like General Electric, and again, Harriman got his hands on quite a lot of the technologies. But it's in the hands of corporations, not governments. I dare say there's a very, very small faction in governments who knows what's going on, but, you know, they're under their orders from, you know, it's run by the mega rich. Richard Dolan talks about a breakaway civilization. I think we've got that now. I think the mega rich have got spaceships. I think it's not too far removed from reality. I think a lot of the things you've seen up there is millionaire playboys flying around in this secret craft. Do you know about Gary McKinnock? He did a Rich Planet interview. He suffers from Asperger's syndrome, and he was sitting on his. This was back in the days he had a dial-up modem. He was sitting at home, and he got into some of NASA systems using very simple hacking techniques, and he came across the list of non-terrestrial officers. He came across a list of ships, fleet-to-fleet transfers, and he came across a lot of other very classified stuff. He came across a picture of a craft as well, and they tried to have him extradited to America for 10 years just for these cranky computer crimes. I think he was about 19 at the time when he did it, but they've been trying to extradite him for years and years. It was only a couple of years ago that said, look, we're not going to extradite him, forget about it. But what Gary McKinnock found, it can't be played down at all. This is just my opinion. It is the biggest secret. It is the biggest secret. They don't want you to know. Apparently it's operated by the Navy, and they have a thing called Solar Warden, which is the black triangle you see flying around, and apparently it's protecting us from this space war that's going on. But I don't know how much truth there is to that. You've got to listen to people like what's his name, Corey Good, and them folks. I'm not convinced, but I'm not ruling them out either. I think there possibly is a colony on Mars and stuff, but whether they'd let that information get out, it's a different story. NASA itself is a smokescreen. That's all it is. They're using solid and liquid fuel propulsion, the same ones they were like in the 1950s and 60s. They're using the same technology. Can you imagine using the same computer technology then, today, when you've got a handheld device that's more powerful than the computer they used to go to the moon? They wouldn't be doing it. We've moved leaps and bounds from solid and liquid fuel propulsion. There's a guy called David Adair. He was taken to Area 51 as a kid. He was a child genius. He built rockets with his dad, who had a motor racing shop, and his rockets got bigger and bigger, and eventually when he was 15, he won a DoD grant to build a magnetic fusion containment rocket when he was 15, and by the time he was 17 he finished this thing. He'd been launching these other rockets from cow fields in Ohio. He couldn't launch this from a cow field, so they took up the White Sands missile range, and said there's some NASA officials there, and he says there's some DoD guys in mirrored sunglasses, and they said, we want you to put your rocket down in this location, and he says, well, why we're landing in a dry lake bed in Nevada? got to bear in mind this was the he said just put it down there, and he says the rocket was completely successful. He said it was like it was trying to like watching a bullet leave the barrel of a gun. It was that fast. It was very successful. It went from 0 to over 3,000 miles per hour in a split second. Very successful. Anyway, they got on the plane and he says, you know, your plane's got wheels and landing in a dry lake bed, it's going to belly up in dirt when we land. Don't worry about it. And he says, sure enough, they got there and there was two 10,000-foot twin runways. It was Area 51. Now he thought they were going to go and see his rocket. He could see the parachute bellowing in the wind at the end of the facility, but they didn't. They took him into this big warehouse, and the whole thing was a huge worm screw elevator, and it took them down about 20 stories, and they pulled the tarp off this thing that they wanted him to have a look at, and he's saying, well, why do you want us to have a look at your engine? You know, and they started saying, you know, the people who were around aren't around to work on it anymore, just tell what you think. And basically, it was a rocket the same as his. It was a magnetic fusion containment rocket, but he says his was like a Ford Model A. He says this thing's like a Ferrari, you know. And he said it was a symbiotic engine. It had no wires, it had no moving parts, and they were asking him about the firing system, and he worked out what was happening with it. And he's like, "Why am I telling you about your rocket?" He's going, "From the size of this rocket, it's from a ship, probably about the size of a football field. That ship had occupants. What on earth have you done with them?" He says, well, that was the wrong thing to say, and that up on the rocket coming after him, and it's time to go. And he's driving back up to the surface, and he said, I just realised what this thing is. It's a symbiotic engine. The reason it didn't have any wires is because when the pilot sits in the seat, the pilot can feel everything the ship feels, and the ship can feel everything the pilot feels. Now, this isn't far removed from what's actually happening today. In the F-16 fighter jets, you've got a thing called mental shielding, and let's say the pilot goes home, finds his missus in bed with another man, and he's having a bad day, and he goes to fire some missile. It won't let him fire the missile because it knows he's having a bad day. And this technology is some 30, 40 years old now, so, you know. I think this is how UFOs work, and I think this is what they're working on now, and I think it's got something to do with abductions as well, why they're harvesting genetic material. Not because they need it to live, I think they need it to make some of these crafts that they're making, because they're symbiotic crafts. And if you think about it, actually I'll get on to it, I think I have a slide. Yeah, this guy, Ben Rich, misquoted quite a lot. You'll hear a lot. He's the former director of Lockheed Skunk Works. This guy preceded him. He was Boyd Bushman. Both guys are dead now. Now, Ben Rich gave a lot of lectures in ufology. You'll hear his name get mentioned a lot. He's very misquoted. But yeah, people say, yeah, they got the contract to take ET home. He used to say that at the end of all his lectures, you know, just as a kind of fun anecdote, saying, what we're doing at the minute? Well, we've just won a contract to take ET home. But on his last lecture at UCLA, a lot of people surrounded him. In fact, two famous ufologists, the names on the tip of my tongue, I'll not hang around, but they crowded him and said, what do you mean, what do you mean? And I think Ben Rich just wanted to get away pretty quick, because he says, you know how ESP works? You know how telepathy works? That's how they work. Off out the door, and I think you might have let the cat out of the bag there. Right, Boyd Bushman, David Sereda made a good video, did a good interview with him. It's called From Here to Andromeda, and he tells you how some of this anti-gravity stuff essentially works, as far as they're going to tell you how much it works. But he died 2 years ago, and unfortunately for him, he said, oh yeah, here's pictures of aliens that they have and everything, and the alien looks just like a toy alien that you buy from every Kmart in America. It looks just like a toy. So unfortunately, I think it took the credence away from Boyd Bushman. But make no mistake, if there's two people that know anything, it was him and him. They're definitely behind some of the secret space programs. Yeah, it's another video. Here's this was taken in, I can't pronounce it, Pipiras in Syria. We've got two black triangles, and I don't know what this is, but it interacts with the two black triangles. I don't think this is a fake video, by the way. I think this is a real video from everything I've read about it and looked at. So if ever you see anything like this, it'd be very hard to keep it in focus anyway, because you'd want to zoom in on these things, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just want them in the distance. But really, when you're filming UFOs, you should get something to scale it against. If ever you're filming one, try and get a tree in there or something, because there's no way of telling just how far away these things are, so we can't tell how big they are.
I can see it more there now.
These things don't fly, they float. They don't make any noise. It's one of Richard D. Hall's films. It's called Nearly Identified Flying Objects, I think it's called. He does a good bit and tells you how they assume that they work, and it's very, very scientifically plausible how they work, how they've done it. Oh. There's one or two flying triangles, popular flying triangle videos out there I'm a bit dubious about. As you know, with the inception of Photoshop and all these video making programs, it's nearly impossible to tell real from fake. But from everything I've read, this one's real. Got a couple other ones to show you later as well. Any guesses? Anyone think this is a disc? An orb? A F-16 fighter jet? Swamp gas on the planet Venus? You don't see any more black triangles. Anyway, this is my favourite case ever for UFOs on Earth. That is, it happened in Colares, Brazil in 1977. The city, it's on the Amazon basin in northern Brazil, and multiple blue lights and other lights descended on them, and the people actually call these things the chupa chupa, which translates as sucker sucker, because they were sending down a beam, it felt like it was sucking the blood out and burning them. There was over 400 people were injured. The nurse who was treating the injuries, she's been on the record saying they're all consistent with like a cobalt radiation burn, which is it's a highly radioactive substance, cobalt, and it's always blue as well, which makes sense. But the mayor of Colares was so concerned that he actually called in the military, and there was years of official involvement, even though the military came to the conclusion that there's nothing strange going on, but of course we're going to say that. Right, there's over 1,200 official documents released relating to this case and other high profile cases. However, is anyone proficient in Portuguese? Because I'm not. So I haven't been able to translate the documents. I'm hoping someone somewhere will translate them soon. But A.J. Javard, who's a ufologist in Brazil, he's instrumental in getting all these documents released. And if you want to know anything about Colares, A.J. Javard is the authority. But it's one of the best cases out there. It is the best in my eyes. You've got flying saucers, you've got beams of light, you've got physical injuries, you've got military involvement, you've got photographs, thousands of people's witness statements.
Has this got any connection to these farmers in Brazil with the animals are getting mutilated?
Possibly.
And blood
That's
out of them?
yeah. That's
That's chupacabra.
the chupacabra. Yeah, that translates as the goat sucker.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's
So
that's
is that connected anyway?
well, possibly. I think it's more a cryptozoological matter. There is people who look into these things. I don't know if it's. I wouldn't say. If it is, I don't think it's alien. I think it's probably.
That's what they were saying.
Yeah, it's probably in my opinion, it's something that's been here all the time. Same as Bigfoot. You know, I think Bigfoot's a terrible name for it. You know, I think Bigfoot's like the term conspiracy theory. You know, but these cryptozoological creatures, I think, have been here longer than us. I think they've been here since the giants, you know. But animals are clever. I think they can I think they're not stupid. I think they know humans are the real danger on the planet, so some things just completely hide themselves away. Calaras is up here on the Amazon basin. Here's some of the official documents. Of course, you see the track of the UFO, where the people lived, where it got burned, and like I said, can anyone translate? Anyone? Any Portuguese speakers in here? No? Okay, we're going to struggle there.
Yeah, that's the 2nd of September 77.
Yeah. And again, like I say, these documents were classified for 35 years before they were released. They were absolutely classified. They were not going to release them either. Here's 2 photographs. These photographs were actually taken by the military at the time. When there was a military investigation, they did see some lights, but they just put it down to things like, you know, the planet Venus and whatnot. But I think the Americans have got an embargo on the UFO truth thing. Any country that comes into contact with them quickly has to obey what the Americans are saying for some particular reason. It does seem like the Americans hold all the cards when it comes to dealing with the UFOs. And like I say, these things were beaming light down, sucking blood out of people, and again, it's a genetic harvest. But what's the genetic harvest for? There's a lady getting treated. They all had a very similar injury. It was very similar to a cobalt burn, and there was hundreds of victims. Right, skeptic or skeptics. There's rationalism, rational skepticism, and irrational skepticism. We've all came across irrational skeptics, yeah? I'd call them skeptics with a K. Have you heard about this? I don't need to read about that. The best case is a friend of yours, actually, Rupert Sheldrake. Professor Rupert Sheldrake is a Cambridge professor. He did some work on a universal field theory, where your memories are held external from your body in a universal field. And is said that the other professors in Cambridge. So what do you think? And well, it's preposterous, isn't it? He was going, well, why do you think it's preposterous? It just is. Have you read me work? I don't need to read it. Irrational skepticism. Okay? They have no argument. They're entrenched in belief. They don't need to read it or watch it because they've made up their own mind anyway. Everyone should be rationally skeptical. Everyone should be skeptical. Never take anything at face value. Ask questions, read about it, watch the things the people have told you to watch, then make up your own mind. Not until you've got every bit of available evidence and looked at it, then you can make your own mind up. But that's just what these things involve. The whole of the truth movement, especially when it comes to UFOs, aliens, anything like that, it's just your opinion. All this is my opinion. That's all it is. That's all we have is an opinion. But if you have an opinion, make sure it's rational. Terminology watch. Might be some religious people in here. I just feel like the term I believe that it's entrenched in dogma. You know, if you're speaking to a skeptic and you're like, well, I believe, well, you're digging yourself a hole there already, I think. You should be convinced. Convince yourself of the evidence. Don't just believe it. Be convinced by the evidence, because the problem is when you believe Islam, Catholicism, Buddhism, Orthodoxy, Hinduism, you can't change that belief based on your new evidence. Whereas if you're convinced by the evidence, well, you're convinced by evidence. The evidence might change. Right, I'm not so convinced anymore. I'm going to look at it differently. A very good person for doing that is Richard A. Hall. He's changed a few theories based on new evidence, which is what I think we all should do. Right, engage in the disengaged. You all know a lot of disengaged people. Like the fluoride in the water. Okay, ease them in gently, okay? Talk to them about the BBC News. Okay? Talk to them about Sky News, because then you're using examples you're both familiar with. You know, there's no conspiracy that, you know, the world's run by shitheads. There's no conspiracy that we're all in debt, is there? You know what I mean? Try and use examples like that and try easing them in gently and agree on some issues. Once you get them agreeing on some issues, it's a bit easier to talk to them like things like UFOs and 9/11s. But here's the clincher. Never mix your unofficial theories. If you're talking to someone who's disengaged, the last thing they're going to respond to is, the banks have to make more money out of debt. Do you know 9/11 was an inside job? It was done by UFOs. Oh, fucking hell, the Earth's flat. They're going to be gone like a bloody rat out in that aqueduct. If you're going to talk about UFOs, talk about UFOs. If you're going to talk about 9/11, talk about 9/11. Do not talk about UFOs and 9/11 in the same breath. I mean, yes, it's a rabbit hole. Yes, it goes down. You don't want to push people down it, do you? And scare the bloody life out of them. Okay? Just little bits, generally. Have you seen this? Show them things that's really hard to dispute. You know, like the tower turning to dust in midair. That's pretty hard to dispute, isn't it? That's science. That's what we want here. Two sides, physics and metaphysics. They're like an antagonistic divorced couple. Okay? The two of them never speak to each other. Oh, well, we're not interested in you, or we're not interested in you. These aren't interested in this because they can't measure it, quantify it, repeat it in a lab. And I've heard some people on the metaphysics side saying, well, you know, you're just indoctrinated through school and universities, science is bollocks. You know, and with this as well, I'm going to have to pick on Flat Earth for a minute, because it's them who dispute science more than anybody. Yet while they're sitting arguing with people on the computer, that by the way is using physics that they're disputing. Okay, they're trying to dissent science, see it indoctrinated, all the while they're doing it on a thing that's using generic physics that they're trying to dispute. Okay, physics and metaphysics. I think both are very important. I just think they both should come together. They should work hand in hand. They shouldn't be on two separate roads. But I understand why they are. Okay, science-based, you can measure, quantify, touch, interact. It's repetitive under controlled conditions. I'd say the Freeman movement is, you know, it's demonstratively provable. It's not science, but it's demonstratively provable. Traditional space research, well, you can't dispute that. It's right in front of your face. This is how it works. Solid and liquid gas propulsion. Astronomy and cosmology, I think that's important because you can look up. It's the only pure form of science left. Look up, there's the stars. Look how they shine for you. Okay, CBT, THC realizations, well, in health issues, we're seeing that more and more. It's crumbling around them. So, you know, I mean, all these things could be classed as conspiracy theories. So I put 9/11 in here because it is demonstratively provable. It's provable that it didn't happen through the way they said it happened. Political issues, well, television twists them and the media twists them, but you've got to remember that we still have a tiny shred of democracy that we've got to keep hold of. The metaphysics category, right, there's no scientific way of appeasing the other side. It's provable through things like mediums, psychics, channelers, mystics, shamans. And I put skeptical rebuttals in the irrational sides as well, because they're more irrational than anything. They're the irrational skeptics. Don't want to read that. Don't have to. I made up my mind. In the middle here, I can't categorise these in either. Okay, so I think there's enough scientific evidence for all of these things. However, the science-based reality won't have it because they can't repeat it in a lab. Okay, that's why there's a third section for more videos. Yeah, this one was released by the
Chilean government agency which investigates UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena, has declassified and released never-before-seen video from 2014 showing a mysterious flying object of which they suggest could have been a UFO. According to a press release from the agency, a Navy helicopter spotted the unidentifiable object while patrolling a coastal region near Santiago, Chile. The unknown object was seen flying at a constant speed, similar to that of the helicopter, and moving forward. The pilot tried several times to communicate with the object, but he received no reply. Air traffic control failed to detect any flying objects on radar. In 2 instances, the object ejected some type of gas or liquid with high thermal tracking. Captured on video, you can see a massive plume of material trailing behind the object. Moments later, a second ejection of the unspecified discharge. The flying object was visible for about 10 minutes before disappearing into the clouds without a trace.
Can I just
What
say,
could it be?
this is
Was it a
infrared,
UFO?
this is an
Air
invisible
Force
light,
photo
you cannot
analysts
see that
confirmed that
invisible
the
light,
three-dimensional
just
object
see that.
was real, with volume, and showcased control in its movements. They established that there was no evidence of hoaxing or alteration of the video by any computer application in the editing and processing of the images. Officials also ruled out a bird or flying insect, a drone, parachute, or a hang glider. After an extensive study, the Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena agreed it had all the characteristics to be classified as an unidentified aerial phenomenon. For FoxNews.com, I'm Rob Demetrius.
I didn't realise I downloaded the one with the commentary on there, but as you see there, that was released by the Chilean government, and something quite clearly, all them that picture you're seeing, the original footage, it goes in between visible light and infrared. Everything you've seen there was in the infrared, so you wouldn't have been able to see it with your eyes, but what was the gas it was releasing? That's the chemtrail, the end-all chemtrails, isn't it? This is over Hong Kong. This was on the BBC.
Must be real then.
Well, just watch up here.
Building makeshift barricades, all of this in an attempt
You'd imagine like the editor and the back
change to voting in the 27th election for their next leader. They want a free vote, and they're being told that no candidates will be vetted by the powers that be in China. The leader of Hong Kong urging them to
I think it'll show you again in slow motion. I hope it's the one that shows you again in slow motion. The speed in which it goes up is phenomenal. And that's one of my favourite modern videos, because it was on the news. It was just happening in the background. They weren't expecting it. Like I say, I laugh when I think about the editor and the editing. You know, that's very hard to dispute as something like a drone. You might have said it was a drone just going across, but once it shoots up into the sky, sorry, I don't know any drones that can go that fast. This is just a video I'm going to end with. It's about Project Bluebeam. You all heard Project Bluebeam? Yeah, it's just a bit of nonsense about it. I quite like the video, so I thought you'd like it too.
The disclosure.
It's got a capital D.
Hey, are your ideas for global takeover falling apart? Or humanity's mass awakening? Is false flag terrorism fizzling out? Global warming gone cold on you? Do you want those global warming deniers to just go away? Are all your phony economic crises being exposed? Is the price of gold defying all your attempts to fix it? Isn't killing the Gulf of Mexico and poisoning millions of people reducing the population fast enough for you? War, famine, and GM food not getting it done either? No? Well, don't give up. Get disclosure. You'll be able to unite mankind with a phony problem and enslave them with one world government and taxes. Yes, disclosure. Your one-stop shop for full spectrum dominance. But wait, there's more. Sign up for disclosure today and you'll get problem, reaction, solution absolutely free. That's right, absolutely free. Act now to be entered into our fabulous propaganda prize draw. Disclosure. Our surveys show that 9 out of 10 world leaders prefer it. Disclosure. Cleansing the minds of the unwashed masses with a tantalizing, terrifying, taxable new reality. I'm only going to say this 3 times. Disclosure. Disclosure. Aliens may or may not be real. Your home may be at risk from those possible aliens. No major credit cards accepted because there's only one currency in a global government. Prepare to die screaming, by the way. Disclosure is compatible with Project Bluebeam. Do not employ critical thinking.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Hey.